Lepo pozdravljeni. Zdaj se bomo vrnili.
Ladies and gentlemen, so we are now back to reality. My name is Primož Žerjav, and I'm representative of the Cooperative Union of Slovenia. The Cooperative Union, I think, was already presented this morning. You will hear something more about it tomorrow. As you know, this is an NGO which combines agriculture and forestry cooperatives. So this is our area of work. But we're also the only larger cooperative association union here in Slovenia. I am personally very pleased that this debate is now taking up momentum, and we are not just talking among ourselves, the cooperatives amongst ourselves, convincing the convinced how everything is really great in the field of cooperatives. We have very interesting numbers to present also regarding cooperatives here in Slovenia. We have 76 members of our union, and all of our cooperatives employ about 16,000 people. They have around 16,000 members. We employ about 3,000 people, and we create about 600,000 and 700,000 euro of turnover. So we cannot say that we do not have cooperatives here in Slovenia. We do indeed, as these numbers show. And as you already heard, we are celebrating this year the 140th anniversary of the cooperatives movement in our country. And we are also celebrating an important anniversary of the cooperative union, so kind of the second re-established cooperative union here in Slovenia. Listening to my colleagues earlier, I had the feeling that people are quite surprised in the audience that cooperatives are active in all these fields presented by my colleagues. So what we try to do also whenever we have an opportunity is that cooperatives can function as companies in any fields. Unfortunately, in Slovenia, we've only had agriculture cooperatives. Now, to go back to my presentation, I'd just like to share a couple of words in general about what we have done within the Cooperative Union of Slovenia. How have we interacted, cooperated with public institutions here in Slovenia, and what conclusions have we made, what are the limitations and what are the potentials for cooperatives. We have the Cooperatives Act, as you know. This act, I believe, is appropriate for any form of cooperatives, be it labor cooperatives, social cooperatives. And you also have the Social Entrepreneurship Act, which first is foreseen cooperatives to be parts of social enterprise. But in the end, in the final draft, actually, this was taken out. And the legislators did take into account some of the comments we've made. So now we have the Cooperatives Act. And as we've heard earlier, cooperatives are owned by the members, not by investors, such as other forms of more traditional enterprises. And of course, I do believe that cooperatives can provide interesting solutions in different fields. In Slovenia, we preferred some kind of self-employed sole traders forms of employment, but we now can see that these are not as successful as they used to be, and we're looking for new solutions. In other countries of the EU, we have different acts, and different acts differently define, regulate the field of cooperatives. However, there are some similarities also when it comes to social enterprise. Cooperatives do have special mission to meet the needs of its members, so they are not profit-oriented, but they rather try to work for some kind of more general benefit of its members and society. And also, one member, one vote applies, so they are much more democratic than other forms of enterprises. But of course, as we've heard today, sometimes we do have problems, and then we appoint kind of a main manager of co-op who has to deal with all these problems and complaints. Now, something about the limitations and potentials. There are subjective and objective limitations, I could say. On the one hand, we have the willingness of the members to start to organize themselves in the form of cooperatives. So what we have to do is awaken the awareness of individuals to become members of the co-ops. And I believe that we haven't done enough yet here in Slovenia in this field. And then, of course, we have to provide an adequate environment, legal and business environment for development of the co-ops. Of course, the first type of limitations can be resolved through education. We know that at our universities we do not have special departments or programs that are directly related to the co-ops. I believe that the state could have special programs for the promotion of cooperatives as the potential success enterprises. Now, I think this is doable, while this second point is a little bit more difficult. In the past, the business environment was not adequate for the cooperatives. It did not enable some kind of organic growth of the co-ops. And that is why the co-ops remained limited to just these two main fields of activity. Some of the limitations still present here today are mainly two, some of them completely related just to the co-ops, not to other forms of enterprises. So we have some legislation that is discriminatory towards the co-ops. As I've mentioned, we mainly have forestry and agricultural co-ops. Somehow we did not manage to communicate this idea of cooperatives being active, capable of acting also in other sectors. So often the cooperatives could not organize themselves or participate at some tenders, etc. And due to discrimination over the past couple of years, the cooperatives did not receive sufficient funding and other supportive measures. So there seems to be some kind of positive discrimination towards other forms of enterprises. So it seems that legislation is somehow more adapted to the more traditional forms, and the legislation does not take into account the specificity of the co-ops. So, of course, here I would mainly mention the audits and the tax legislation. Now, if we take a look at the history just for a moment, we had the old investment law, which stated that only natural persons or legal subjects could organize themselves into the co-ops. And there was even a court case related to it, and in the end, the court judgment said that the co-ops actually have different purpose from other companies and that this should be changed. Then something similar happened with the law on buildings. We used to have some kind of housing cooperatives who did participate in the preparation of that act, but then the new act from 1996 prevented cooperatives to participate in the housing and building activities and projects. And once again, there was a court case, and it ruled against this limitation, and this limitation was then erased from the legislation. Of course, however, there are a number of different limitations still existing in our legislation today, especially when it comes to the banking sector, for example, because we need startup capital, as we've heard. Yes, of course, startup capital is the very hot part and parcel of the co-ops. But there were other limitations that did not enable co-ops to provide this type of activities. So banks can only be joint ventures or some other more traditional forms, but the co-ops could not. We used to have some kind of loan banks in the past, credit kind of unions. Actually, it took us a long time to reorganize them in a way that we could continue to function as some kind of bank cooperatives. Then when it comes to the insurance area, we do have the mutual insurance, but we only have one insurance company offering this type of insurance. Now, if we go back to governmental subsidies, often we received answers. Whenever we asked for funds, they would tell us that the co-ops do not produce any added value, that we should become LTDs or joint stock ventures or whatever, and in that way then participate in different national programs. But a couple of years ago, there was a study which really showed that we have very different situations in different European countries. However, we could not see the co-ops being discriminated in this way in other countries. This all seems slightly irrelevant, but I believe that this shows clearly how legislators understand the idea of cooperatives. That is why we thought that what we have to do is change the Cooperatives Act and change their status, legal status. However, we did not manage to do it. The only thing that was written down is that the co-ops can receive state aid, full stop. That's all that was changed. So what actually happened with the Entrepreneurship Act also is that in the past, co-ops were considered enterprises, and now with the new act, actually co-ops are no longer enterprises. Now, there are other problems and issues that are, of course, not present just here in Slovenia, but also in other European countries. When it comes to the capital of the of the co-ops. The shares were not considered as capital. And of course, this had an important impact on the operational capacity of the co-ops. While on the other hand, actually, the situation is quite similar with other more traditional forms of enterprises, but this was not considered. So again, we were kind of discriminated. We tried to really talk to all institutions, but we did not manage to achieve any desired results. We did manage, though, to exclude the requirements of the audit report for the cooperatives from the Cooperatives Act, because these auditors were kind of like a fourth body controlling the functioning of the cooperatives, and of course this was completely unnecessary. Then what is also true is that we could do much more in other fields of activity because as we have heard, in other countries, there are different cooperatives working in many different fields. So I think we could do much more in this field. And in different European countries, there are also some tax benefits for cooperatives working in certain areas, and I do believe that at least for social cooperatives or labor cooperatives, we should introduce some kind of tax benefits. There are also other things that could and should be done, but I will not go into it now because I'm running out of time. Now, in conclusion, I would just like to reiterate that it's important to raise awareness on the importance of cooperatives and social enterprises for especially young entrepreneurs, for young people, younger generations, especially if we wish the cooperatives to move from this traditional agricultural crafts, forestry sector to these new fields of activity that we are also monitoring here at the Cooperative Union of Slovenia. Then there are different limitations that need to be tackled, and should we tackle them successfully, then I believe conditions will be good both for labor cooperatives as for social enterprises. We need to further raise awareness of the legislators regarding the need of development of social enterprises in the direction of the cooperatives, and we have to promote better our cooperatives. I surely do hope that this conference is the step in that direction, that the general public will now have more information regarding and better understanding of the co-ops. We've heard something about the activities of the European Association, and we should follow in that direction. I know, as we've heard from Dr. Borzaga, that they focus especially on the youth and the young people, and we should not forget about them here either in Slovenia. Thank you very much.